everyone. I am so excited to be here today to chat with a fabulously talented Tammy Kaufman, who is the creator of the Diaphanous Oracle Deck. This is a fabulous 84 card deck that features Tammy's original artwork. It is absolutely stunning, and I am so excited to have the chance to chat with her today. Yeah, I don't know if you have heard about the deck so far, but it is absolutely stunning. Like, the artwork that Tammy has included is just gorgeous. And it's a wonderful deck because it is made to be used as an intuitive deck. So there is a guidebook that has keywords in it, but it's really set up so that you can tune in deeply to your own feelings and emotions and see what's going on for you at any particular point in time. So it's very, very exciting. Let's see here. Let's see about... here we go. Sorry. There we go. Just get so excited. I can't tell you how amazing this deck is and how excited I am to be able to talk with Tammy about it. It's really, really special. So just give them a... Tammy, hi!
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Oh, fabulous. Your hair, can I just say, is absolutely incredible. I love it so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, it's lovely. I just got a question. The name of the deck is the Diaphanous Oracle. Did I pronounce that correctly? I hope so. Yeah. It's an 84 card deck that the approach is focused on intuitive reading, which is so fabulous. You've included some gorgeous keywords here, and I love that it allows space for connecting with yourself and really tuning into not what someone else has written, but what your heart and your soul is telling you. It's so beautiful.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm so curious to know, you're an insanely talented artist. What was your journey towards becoming an artist? Like, what did that look like for you?
It's so weird to have somebody call me an artist because I've never been an artist. I've never considered myself an artist. This actually started, I was a mountain biker.
Mm-hmm.
I was an endurance mountain bike racer. And I did the 24-hour races. So we would start at noon on Saturday, and we would ride straight through and finish at noon on Sunday.
Oh, my goodness.
So I would spend the whole 24 hours, out in the woods,
Mm-hmm.
basically. There were hundreds of other people, but not everybody rides their lap at the same time. So most of the time, I was actually riding by myself out in the woods, and I just loved it. I didn't care about winning. I didn't care about any of that. It was such an opportunity to me to be able to take 24 hours and just go play on my bicycle in the woods. I mean,
Oh, I love that.
as a 40-something, 50-something-year-old woman, to be able to do that was just, it was remarkable. And I did that for a few years and then got severely injured, actually in training, not at a race, just out on a fun ride. I got injured and was off the bike for probably a year and a half, maybe.
Yeah.
And so during that time, I missed that connection that I had. And on June 23rd, 2013, I guess, is when I became an artist, because I sent my husband Steve to the store and I said, I want you to just buy me a cheap set of watercolors and a sketchbook because I want to paint. So I just decided I want to paint.
Yeah.
So that was a way for me to recapture what I had seen on the bike, just to be able to paint those things. That I didn't need reference photos at first because they're burned into your memory when you ride through these trails, hour after hour after hour. So I went kind of wild and just painted every single day. And then on July 15th, 2013, I know it seems weird to know the dates, but they were important.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
I was at the art store and saw some soft pastels, and I thought, oh, those look really cool because I don't have to
Yeah.
use a brush. I can
Yeah.
put my hands in there.
Yeah.
So I bought some of those and started painting with those. And what I had done for a couple of years was just paint those landscapes, the
Mhm.
scenes that I had
Yeah.
seen. And then in about late 2015, early 2016, something just came over me, and I just felt this. I don't even know how to describe it. It was almost like something else just kind of took over, and I just started painting all these abstract things, which I have never been an abstract art kind of person. It never made sense to me. I would look at it and think, I must really be stupid because I can't understand this stuff at all. So I started just painting these things, and they just like poured out of me
Mhm.
for several years.
Oh,
And
amazing.
then I don't know why, a keyword would come into my mind and I would just paint it.
Oh, I
And
love that.
then when I finished all of those,
Yeah.
then as quickly as that came on, it stopped. And I went back to my regular painting pastel landscapes a few
Yeah.
times a month. And it was so weird. And I just kept thinking, the whole time I was painting these things in this frenzy, I guess,
Yeah.
I did not know why.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand it. It was just an obsession. It was something I had to do.
Yeah.
And then I never knew anything about divination cards until
Mhm.
I was looking around on Instagram. I saw your page and I thought, wow, that looks really interesting. So I, it kind of clicked with me this year, actually. That's what that frenzy was. That's what those paintings are. That they're not
Yeah.
supposed to be just paintings,
Yeah.
because I painted them on everything. Like Struggle, for example, is
Yeah.
on a bathroom tile,
Oh my God, I love that so much.
and Acceptance was painted on a piece of bamboo flooring sample they gave me at Lowe's.
Oh my goodness, that's
And
fabulous.
yeah, and Expression was painted on a piece of aluminum flashing that was left over from some roof work we had done. So
Oh my goodness, that's
they
amazing.
were just painted on everything, and I used any kind of media I could find. I used all kinds of inks and watercolors and paint and wax and things you're not supposed to mix together, but I didn't care. That's what I felt compelled to do.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me this year, that's what those paintings are. They're not just paintings. This is a deck.
Yeah.
And it was 84 of them, and they just, I don't know, it just kind of clicked in my head. These are not paintings. This is a deck. These were meant to be a deck. And
Oh,
that, I guess, was my intuition telling me, here's the keyword, now paint it. So I did, and didn't really even think about it. And that's why I didn't have a Kickstarter. I didn't have a big, oh, I'm making a deck, because honestly, I didn't know I was making a deck. You are the only person besides my husband who has even seen these things as they were coming along.
oh, that's amazing.
Nobody else has even seen the cards coming along. It was just, oh, she's doing some little paintings and doodles, and oh my God, there's a deck.
I feel so honored. It's been so amazing following along with your process. And I don't know about you, but I find anything that I've created that feels like anything at all, it's almost like I'm a conduit. It's being channeled through me. It's not from me, it's from something else, and it's just like it's flow. And that state of flow that you mentioned with just all the creativity and everything, like that's amazing. And I find like anytime I've had any kind of inspiration, it feels like that, right? It's like, and there's a
Yeah.
beginning and an end point, and there's a fluidity to it that's just so beautiful. Oh my God, I love that so much.
And it
That's
was so
amazing.
weird too, because it was just this frantic. I would paint
Yeah.
every single day for 4 years. I painted every day.
Yeah.
In my little online galleries,
Yeah.
each year I painted around 400 to 500 paintings per year,
Wow, that's
which is
incredible.
insane. But some days I would paint 4 or 5 paintings.
Yeah.
And I know my handful of Instagram followers, thank you. I know they've seen all these posts and over the years and thought, do you not do anything else? And yes, I did. I was working full time during this period also.
Yeah.
So I painted as soon as I got home. I painted, I'd walk the dog, come back and paint some more, have dinner, go back and paint some more. It was just, I had to do it. I felt like I had to.
Yeah.
And that, when I got the keywords for each of the paintings, I did notice that each day that same keyword might mean something completely different.
Yeah.
And I looked back at them when I was having them printed on the cards.
Mhm.
None of those words are positive and none of those words are negative.
Yeah.
Every single one of them is neutral and can be
Mhm.
viewed in so many different ways. And I went over it in my head a million times and decided I don't want to write a guidebook. I
Yeah.
love great guidebooks. I really
Yeah.
do. I also know I get really dependent on a guidebook, and I
Mhm.
will tend to just glance at the artwork and then read what the artist wants me to know, which is
Mhm.
great. But then I found when I was reading that way, I was trying to force what I was feeling into what I was supposed to feel based on what the
Mhm.
guidebook says.
Yeah.
These cards they don't expect you to feel any certain way. I don't want to tell you how to feel because
Mhm.
I don't know how I feel half the time. I'll pull
Yeah.
the same card 3 days in a row and it means three completely different things to me, depending on what's
Yeah.
happening. And
Oh,
so
absolutely.
I don't want people to think I got lazy and didn't write a guidebook. I really thought
Yeah.
about this and put a lot of effort into it. And the cards just did not seem to want that. They
Yeah. Well,
didn't
and I,
want me to tell you what they mean. I really, and as an artist, of course, I really want you to look at the imagery. Never
yeah.
mind the keyword. That was the keyword that came to me. That may not
Yeah.
be the keyword you feel when you
Yeah.
look at it. So I
Yeah.
would suggest if you look at the imagery and you aren't really getting anything, then look at the keyword. But
Yeah.
look at the imagery first. Even I
Yeah.
painted these and I look at them now and I still see, oh, I didn't see that before. So,
Yeah.
and I made them and I still see new things. So
That's
I would say look at
amazing.
the artwork.
Yeah, and that's the amazing thing about art is that it can mean something different to so many different people. Like I know even reading articles about Bob Dylan and people interpreting his lyrics in certain ways. He's like, well, I didn't mean
Right.
anything when I wrote it, right? Like it is what it
Yeah.
is, and
Yeah.
that's the power of art in whatever form it comes. Is it's open to interpretation, and like I just love your artwork is so stunning. And I ended up opening the deck to gratitude, which makes sense. Because this weekend is Canadian Thanksgiving, which I feel somewhat ambivalent about, but we're taking more of a focus on harvest and gratitude, and I love that so much. And just like the key word pulls you into those ideas and that sense of connection and abundance, and it's so beautiful. And I love that. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of wonderful decks with wonderful guidebooks, but it's not necessary. And what I love about this deck is that it opens up space for you to create that intuitive connection. So you're not
Yeah.
immediately looking for a guidebook that's going to tell you what the card is meant to be, but you get to
Yeah.
focus on art appreciation of the image and then look at the keyword and see how it sits with you, you know? And like you said, it's going to change depending on the day. Gratitude may mean something completely different to me today than it does next week even, right? And that's
Yeah.
so,
Or even tomorrow, it might
yeah,
mean something different.
yeah,
Yeah. So
exactly.
I just I wanted the deck to be able to speak on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Steve, my husband, had even mentioned, well, maybe someday you'll write a guidebook. No, no, I won't. I will for another deck I have in the works, but
Yeah.
this one did not want a
Mhm.
guidebook, and it does not have one.
Yeah.
And I know it seems like a lot of cards, and it is a lot of cards, but you have to remember, for me, it's a really small deck. I
Yeah.
have roughly 7,000 paintings sitting here in this room right now. You can see some of them are on the wall. There's
Yeah.
a whole bookcase beside me that's floor to ceiling that's full of unframed pieces.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so 84 to someone who has several thousand. I'm just like, that's a lightweight deck.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That's only a small fraction of it.
Yeah, that's a tiny bit. But those were the ones that jumped out and insisted on being painted. And the thing that's so unique to me about this deck, for me, those paintings are so not in my usual style.
Mm-hmm.
They're very much outside. And that's why I feel like they were painted by a combination of my inner child,
Mm-hmm.
my intuition, the parts of me I've hidden away, even in some cases, the parts of me that have always felt unlovable or unseen or unwanted. And
Yeah.
I just felt like they just finally I'm going to be 60 this year.
Yeah.
And I think those parts of myself finally said, you know what? You've ignored us for over half a century. We're going to come out and say what we're going to say. So
Oh, I
they
love that
finally
so
did.
much. And I
I'm
love it.
just
Yeah,
happy.
sorry, go ahead. I
No,
just
I'm
cut you
just
off so
happy
quick.
that they did that.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. There's so much power in that. And I love that it's abstract because
Yeah.
there's no model or structure that you're working from in creating it. It's something completely different and outside of anything that you would necessarily be taught. And so there's a flow to it and there's a freedom to it. As someone who struggles to let go and connect with my inner child, I adore that because there's a sense of play and a sense of freedom and a sense of open creation that is so connected to this deck that is just so lovely. And I've been wanting to ask you about the design on the backs of the deck. Like, this is absolutely stunning. I love it so much. So what surface was this one painted on or created on? And what?
It's behind me, the
Oh,
original.
yeah. Oh my goodness, it is true. Look at that. Oh, it's beautiful.
It's behind me. What
Yeah.
happened with that one? For a few years, Jerry's Artorama, which is a big art supply store that their headquarters is here in my town where I live.
Right.
So every year they have this big expo where, they have their things that they make, their paints, their canvases, all the things they have.
Mm-hmm.
And for a few years, they had me come in and do the pastel demo to show people their pastels and, different things like that. And I demoed on different surfaces and things, but 2 years ago, I guess it was 2 or 3 years ago, I did not do it because I was just too busy.
Yeah.
But I went to the expo because a lot of the artist friends that I have here in town were there.
Yeah.
So I went to one booth and that is painted on just a plain cheap canvas. It's like a student grade $3 canvas.
Yeah.
And it was with some acrylic ink markers, which I had not seen before. And I was just like, oh, here's something I've never painted with. I have to paint with it.
Yeah.
So one of my friends she was monitoring that table and she said, oh, here, go ahead and paint something. So I just took the markers. That's just 2 markers. It's just 2 colors. It's a magenta marker and a pale blue marker.
Yeah.
And I took those and I just pressed them around and just kind of let them go wherever my hand felt like it needed to go.
Yeah.
And when I finished with it, she looked at it and said, that's really impressive.
Yeah, no
I
kidding.
was just playing with it. And so I just asked her, because they usually will have a canvas there that everybody can just paint on. And I said, so can I just have this canvas? And so she gave me the canvas and opened another one for people to piddle on. And so I kept that, as my test painting.
Yeah.
But it ended up, it really connected with me in a way. I felt like when I saw that image, it felt like looking at me the way I wish I looked, I guess.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Everybody says, oh, body positivity, and I'm not worried about how I look, but we all do. I am right now, and I don't know what's happening there, but we all do. It's human nature. And so there's always a million things I can find wrong when I look at myself. It's like, oh, I'm getting older. I look like an old woman. And then my inner child is like, you are an old woman. You're going to be 60. You're supposed to look this way. But when I look at that painting, there's something about it. It's like seeing me the way I want to see me. So that's why I chose that one as the cover and the back of the cards.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. And I love that.
It's a fun thing. I didn't even plan to paint. I was just playing with the markers to see what they did and what they looked like. And so of course I ended up buying them. But
oh, what a fun medium to use. That sounds incredible. I'll have to look into that for my kids because they really like playing around with different mediums and surfaces and approaches to art. And, they took a few classes when they were little, but they haven't had any formal classes for a little while with COVID and everything.
I didn't either. I didn't go to art school. I didn't take, but those are just acrylic markers. They're really fun. And they wash up with soap and water, so they're easy.
Ooh, even better.
That's varnish, so that will not come off. But
oh, that's amazing. Yeah, my younger daughter has inherited the klutz gene from me, so anything that's washable is really, really fantastic.
Don't get her pastels then, because
No,
if you
no,
get
I
them
know.
wet, they turn to paint.
Yes. Oh my goodness, indeed. Well, my eldest daughter, Eloise, has gotten really into design. She's using her tablet and she's been watching all kinds of YouTube videos, and she's working on um, body images and structures and building texture and clothing and all kinds of different stuff. And it's been fascinating to watch her process, right? It's not coming from a class. I mean, she is doing instruction on YouTube, but it's very much seeing where it leads her and following along. And it's so lovely, I think, to take that approach where you give yourself permission to just play and to
Yeah.
explore. And like the logo that I currently have on my account came out of a doodle one night. I didn't set
Oh
the
my God.
intention to make my logo or do anything else, and it was just a rough sketch, but it ended up being way better than if I had planned it. Do you know what I mean? If I put all that pressure on myself, it would have just psyched me out, and I would have
Yeah.
referenced back to that grade 11 art teacher who gave me a really terrible grade, and I felt like I couldn't produce art. You know, all of those blocks that you put on yourself. But then when
Yeah.
you access something like this that allows you to connect with your inner child and do it not for any prescribed outcome, but just for the joy of it, there's so much power in that, you know? And I love
Yeah.
that there was such a sense of flow for you with this deck and that everything came together. And one of the questions that I'd wanted to ask you was whether the keywords came first or after the art. And I love that there was so much synchronicity between those two things, like they were created synonymously, and there's so much power in that, you know? It's really, really beautiful.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
art started first,
Yeah.
and then the keyword would come through, and I would complete the art. And but I just, I all of these, I mean, as you know, they were all done by hand.
Yeah.
I cannot paint on a computer. I
Yeah.
cannot do it.
Yeah.
If I don't have the medium in my hands, I can't do it. I mean, all credit to people who do, but that's just, I cannot do that. And I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I love being able to just make a mess everywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to let you see the floor in this room because this is where I paint too.
Yeah.
So, it's a disaster area.
Yeah.
But I like that connection. It feels to me more like a personal connection when I'm actually holding the medium, or if I'm using a brush, which I rarely use a brush, even on these that appear to be painted, like this one, again, Struggle, I painted with a toothpick.
Oh, it's beautiful.
So I just use whatever I have. I've painted with a hair dryer. I've painted
with my goodness.
I've painted with those the palette knives. I've painted with forks from the kitchen. Yeah, that was done with a toothpick.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I love all the detail.
Yeah, there's really not. If you look real closely, there's not.
Some of it like almost comes across like birds, and I see trees. Like it's amazing because there's so many things that you can draw from something. Do you know what I mean? And it can be abstract, but there's little elements of things that resonate for you on whatever level. Like if there's imagery associated with something and then you pull it out of an image, right? It's like that image of the old woman or the young woman, and depending on how you see it, can shift. And for ages, I only saw the young woman, and then I could only see the old woman, and it was just so interesting to look at how your perception can shift with something, right? It's the same image. The image hasn't changed, but you're drawing something new from it based on your perspective, which I think is really amazing.
Yeah, and that's how these cards and the keywords work.
Yeah.
It depends on how you're looking at them. It depends on the question that you're asking, or questions. I've used these for just single card. I've used them for spreads. I've used them with tarot cards. I've used them with other oracle cards. I've used them as clarifiers. So there are a million ways to use these. Sometimes I'll use them at night to kind of think about, bring this into my dream, help me understand what's going on. There are just a lot of ways to look at them, and I know some people maybe buy them just because, oh, look at the pretty art, and if you're getting them for that, thank you.
Oracle and tarot Oh, it's 100% art appreciation for me. And like my husband always bugs me because he's like, he's not a tarot person at all. But if he were ever to get a tarot deck, which I doubt he would, but if he did, he'd have the one deck. And that was the only thing he'd need or
Right.
use. But for
Yeah.
me, I mean, my cloth behind me is covering up my abundance of decks, but each one pulls out something different for me emotionally. And there's some decks that I reach for shadow work because they hit a little harder, you know, in a good way or in a challenging way, whatever I need at the time. And then there's others that are softer and more gentle. And then like, there's a whole range of different decks and different ways to approach them, and I love that they're each an entry point into what it is you need at that particular time, right? And with something like this, it's great because like you said, the meanings aren't inherently positive or negative. There's an entry point into where you're at on that particular day, which is really how I approach my tarot practice is, you know, how do I tune into my feelings and where I'm at today and what is my intuition asking me or wanting me to know on any given day, right? So that's a powerful tool. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. And
so,
I like these for journaling too.
Yeah, yeah.
I know even in my therapy sessions, my therapist has forever been, you need to sit with your emotions. And I'm just like, I don't know what that means. I mean, that's every session was just, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
And now that I've made this deck, I kind of know what that means now.
Yeah.
And so they do let me, if I just draw one or two or even three and look at those together, it does help me sit with an emotion. And it helps give me a starting point to writing. I've noticed since I made this deck and have been reading with it, I'm able to, surprisingly enough, look at it objectively. Like when I look at the cards, I'm not seeing them as something that I painted. They still, I still see them objectively. They still, like I said, I felt like I was just the tool to paint them. So when I look at them now, I still see them as something that someone else did with my hands.
Yeah.
And I'm finding being able to actually do a journal entry that's a little more in depth than just the way I admittedly tend to journal with tarot, which is I know what this card is supposed to mean, so that's what I'm going to write down.
Yeah.
I still haven't gotten out of that yet.
Yeah.
But with these cards, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And so I do understand this deck is not for everybody. It's really for people who are ready to just be brave and be honest with yourself and just look at things. And if you draw a card like rage, that too is not a positive or negative card. Sometimes we need rage. Sometimes rage is a really helpful ally, is a really positive friend. And then there are other times rage is just destructive and a meanie and you need to control it a bit. But every card gives me a chance to really look at the imagery, to look at the word that came to me, or even look at other words that come up to me. There's one card in particular. I was going to show you the original of it.
Oh my gosh.
Which is courage.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much.
So what I frequently see, or the other day I drew courage for myself. And I don't know, I mean, I don't know what other people see in it. There's no right or wrong. But I saw me right here.
Yeah.
At the little, you can see this little person with hands on its hips.
Yeah.
And it's just like got its hair flying back and it's just prancing boldly through all these big scary plants and things.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that just made me feel so supported.
Yeah.
When I pulled it that day. Now I may pull it today and it may mean something completely different. But that day I looked at it and I said, oh, there's a little image in there. It looks just like a little person.
Oh my goodness. I love that.
I see something new every day.
Yeah, that's so great. And I love the idea of using these as a jumping off point for journaling. So do you usually approach it by picking a single card, or do you pull a couple of cards, or like what's your approach for journaling in particular?
It really depends. Sometimes I will, like on some of the journaling challenges that I do, I'll use this deck. Even though it's a tarot challenge, I don't care.
I mean, you can use whatever tool works for you, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll pull one if it's a journaling challenge. If there's a spread, I will pull however many the spread has. If
Yeah.
I'm just journaling for myself, I'll usually start with one or maybe two cards. And if it's two, I'll kind of see how they might relate to one another, sort of like Lenormand,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
way you read a little story,
Yeah.
and I'll let the cards kind of tell me a story. And that can also help me figure out if, and when I say negative, if the card is being read in a negative way, what
Mhm.
it's telling me is these are areas where you need a little more attention. You need to work on
Yeah.
this. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a negative card, like,
Mhm.
but that it's easier to kind of get a story, especially when you're first starting, if you pull two
Yeah.
or maybe even three and just kind of read your story there and just kind of see how they relate. Unlike
Yeah.
Lenormand, I don't read them in an order.
Yeah.
I just kind of look at how the three relate and interact with
Mm.
each other.
Yeah.
Sort of the same way the colors mix and mingle in the cards and just kind of read them
Yeah.
that way. But
So
I can also do it with just one and
yeah.
just really expand on that one emotion.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So
Part
you
of
might
it,
pull one, you might pull one card and that emotion just says, we need to work on this one right now.
yeah.
And so then you can journal on that. But there's no right or wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
Remember, there's no guidebook, so nobody's
Yeah.
judging you.
Yeah. There's no passing grade or feeling great. It's wherever you're
No,
at the time, right?
no.
Yeah.
It's whatever it means to you and whatever you feel
Yeah.
like you need in your life.
Yeah.
I hope that people who have the deck, they'll find what they need
Yeah.
in
Absolutely.
themselves and that the card will kind of help you find that. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean we don't ever need someone else, but it can at least maybe give you a starting point of
Hmm.
where to look. Because I know
Absolutely.
for myself, it was just for so many years, it was just not knowing where to look,
Yeah.
not even being able to name what I was feeling. And I think sometimes if you can name what you feel,
Yeah.
then you can move with it. But if you
Oh,
can't
yeah.
even name it,
Yeah.
then you're already starting at a disadvantage.
Yeah, I know there's huge power in being able to identify that. And I find one of the things that I turn to Oracle and tarot decks for is to clarify what it is that's going in my head, in my head or my heart at that
Yeah.
point, because sometimes it's so close that you can't see the forest for the trees. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's like
Yes.
an external reflection that allows you to see it from a safe distance, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I just had a quick question from someone about which deck it was. So it's the Diaphanous Oracle by the fabulous Tammy Kaufman. That's the one we're talking about right now. So yeah, I just wanted to let you know. Yeah, no, there's so much power in that, and there's so much power in using it as almost a mirror, as it were, holding it
Yes.
up to yourself so then you can explore, because I often find that I'll ask a specific question and then something else will come up, and it's because that was the thing that more pertinently needs to be addressed right now. Like,
Yeah.
I find sometimes when I'm doing readings for people, I'm okay if someone comes in with a specific question, but I actually really like having a free form reading where whatever comes out, because sometimes the question that came in isn't necessarily the thing that is most relevant or most pertinent at this particular point in time. Even when I'm reading for myself, I'll do a spread and what comes out is different from what I was anticipating, but it's what I needed. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
That happens to me a lot with this
Yeah.
deck in particular.
Yeah.
I'll pull a card and I'll think, okay, well, that's not what I asked. But if I really think about it,
Yeah.
that's really what I need to look
Mm-hmm.
at. And that's really what I need to focus. And like you
Mm-hmm.
said, I get that gratitude card
Mm-hmm.
pretty often.
Yeah.
And it's not always, to me, it's not always saying that I'm not appreciating the things I have. A lot of times it is,
Yeah.
but not always. There's so many other areas in that to look at.
Yeah.
And like even with the choices card, and like I'd mentioned earlier with the rage card and
Mm-hmm.
the courage, and there are so many different aspects.
Mm-hmm.
If I covered everything that I felt like each card would be, that guidebook would be 8,000 pages long.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to go through every possible, so
Yeah.
I just decided I'm just going to let the cards speak for themselves.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
like I said, that is absolutely not to diminish decks that
Yeah.
have guidebooks. I love my guidebooks. I
Yeah.
cherish them,
Yeah.
and I value hearing what the artist wanted to say, or the author, if there were two people working on the deck.
Yeah.
I do love that. I just felt like for this deck,
Yeah.
it just felt counterproductive to me to do
Mm.
it for this particular deck.
Oh, for sure. And I love that idea of opening yourself up to what it is you need to focus on, and then the concept of building on that too. So you pull one card, maybe it's a rage card. So what aspect of rage do I need to focus on today? So then you can pull a second card and see what aspect of that first card needs to be focused on, or how to find your way through. Because so much of the time I find when I'm pulling cards, it's identifying the issue, but it's also figuring out how to get to the other side of that. Do you know what I mean? And that's where I find spreads with multiple cards are helpful, because it's almost like following that journey through either the archetype of tarot, or, you know, whatever it is that the oracle is pulling from you that helps you find your way through, right? It's almost like navigating through a forest. It gives you those stopping points that pull you through that journey, not journal, journey, which is so wonderful, you know?
Yeah, it does. And I do like using this deck along with my tarot cards. Because like I told you earlier, I'm still fairly new to tarot. I started with Oracle decks first, reading those. And so for me, tarot, I still have a tendency to get kind of hooked into what it's supposed to mean.
Yeah.
And so if I do a tarot reading, I don't read for anybody but myself. And sometimes I probably shouldn't be reading for myself. If I'm reading for myself and I pull tarot cards and they seem really confusing, or I don't really understand how they relate to the question, I do find that if I pull one of these diaphanous cards, I'm really surprised how many times that card will just be like, that's what it was about.
Yep.
That's the area that you've been not wanting to face. And I do use this deck a lot for my own shadow work. For me, I don't find shadow work scary and dark and, you know, terrifying. I feel like for me, it reintroduces me to parts of myself that I've lost.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think that, to me, it's wonderful. I love doing that kind of shadow work, because it can be painful at times, but I don't think it's this big, scary, terrifying thing.
Yeah.
I think there are parts of all of us that get kind of pushed down and kind of hidden away, and we forget about those parts. And sometimes those are just the most fantastic parts of us once we reintroduce ourselves to them. I don't know about anybody else, but that's where my inner child hides, is in the shadow.
Yeah.
And so it's so wonderful to bring them out and just be able to say, okay, what do you want to tell me today? And sometimes that'll be my question for the oracle, is for my inner child. What is it that you would like to tell me today? In this completely safe, open space where you're supported and you're encouraged to just speak freely and say what you want to say. And I'm always amazed at the cards that I draw for that. They're so my inner child. I frequently draw cards like whimsy. And yesterday I asked my inner child, what do you need from me today? And I drew hugs. And it was just like, oh my goodness, that's just so, you know, and it's just like, of course you do. Of course you do. You're my inner child. Of course you need hugs. So it was just, I just thought it was very sweet. And then, you know, sometimes I look at these cards, and I know that some other deck creators with their first decks have mentioned this briefly. And I just want to tell them, don't be ashamed to say this, because I'm going to say it. And I've always been told, don't brag on yourself, but I'm throwing the rules out. I look at this deck sometimes and cannot believe it. I'm completely overwhelmed that I made this. And I just, for any deck creator who's out there, look at your deck and be proud of what you did, because it's spectacular and the world needs it.
And the world needs people to stand up and claim what they created as something wonderful, you know? Like, I think in society, we're so pressured to be humble, and there's nothing wrong with humility. I think it's a wonderful thing, but it's like we're invited to feel small, you know? We're invited to feel
Yeah.
like we need to downplay our accomplishments, because if you don't, then you're bragging or you're making too much of yourself. I mean, I definitely grew up with a lot of that.
Yeah,
And
I
it
did.
gets to this point where, like you said, with shadow work, your inner child gets so hidden in the dark recesses of yourself,
Mhm.
because you look at children and they claim their accomplishments for themselves until they're told not to. But, you know, sometimes my kids will say, oh yeah, I did a really good job on this. And I have to bite my tongue, because as a child, I was not invited to do that, right? Like, it's
I
not,
was not either. Yes.
no. And so that whole idea, because my initial response is like, oh, that's bragging, that's whatever. And now I've gotten to the point where I can celebrate it with them. And I've always said to them, even if it's uncomfortable for me, yes, you did. Good job. That's wonderful, you know?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, we need to have more of that, because I think, especially in, I think in all areas, there's a lot of people who have had really difficult experiences with owning themselves and owning their accomplishments and their art and their creation, you know, and I think through the education system, sometimes there can be rigid expectations of what art should be and what it
Yeah.
should look like, and the whole grading system, like the C that I got in grade 11 art has been hanging over my head for years, you know, but that was on a particular grading scale, right? And there's so much freedom to be had. And I adore what you said about shadow work, because yes, it can be a lot, but it's also really powerful to bring those things that are deeply hidden about yourself or that you've disconnected from into the light. You can reform a relationship with them, and you can't heal what you can't see. So as long as
No,
it stays hidden, it can be difficult bringing it out to the light, but there's also such freedom and liberation to that, you know, like,
there is.
and I'm a
And
huge
it
proponent of,
loses all of
yeah,
its power
yeah,
once you name it and bring it out.
yeah, absolutely.
And as far as the being proud of what you do thing, I've kind of relearned how to look at that.
Yeah,
If you I don't consider it bragging if you're proud of what you did and
yeah,
you did something that you feel like is good. And I feel like putting my artwork out there, I feel like that was a good thing and I'm proud of that.
mhm,
It was terrifying and it was very scary. But again,
yeah,
once you bring it out of the closet and name it and free it,
yeah,
then it doesn't hold that kind of power anymore.
yeah,
But I think there's a difference in being proud of your own work
hmm,
and being proud of your work at the expense of someone else.
absolutely,
And that's a
100%.
big difference.
Yeah,
I don't, if an artist is proud of what they've created,
yeah,
just because they're proud of what they created, I don't consider that bragging.
not at all.
And, you know, so
Yeah,
if you have to tear people down in order to lift yourself up, then yeah, you might want to revisit exactly what it is you're trying to say
yeah,
and what you're doing. But and
yeah,
that's, you know, I hope that was clear with my guidebook thing. I do love guidebooks.
yeah. Oh yeah,
I could not write one for this particular deck.
no, and you
I
wouldn't need
hope the
to.
one I'm writing for my next deck is going to be half as good as half the ones that I have, because I, you know, I have some decks with guidebooks that I am just
Yeah,
blown away at the skill. And I'm saying this as someone who was a writer in a former life at an ad agency. And
yeah,
I see some of these books some of these deck creators have made, and I am just in complete awe.
me as well.
But I don't think I could have written a book that would do these cards
Yeah.
justice.
And that's the thing, like each deck is individual and it's unique and it needs something different. Do you know what I mean? Like I have some decks that don't have a guidebook, and it would be a waste, because that's not what it's about, you know? It's about the visceral reaction that you have to the artwork and the
Yeah,
keywords that are associated, and it touches you on a different level, you know? And then I have other decks that have guidebooks that help draw me deeper into the cards, right? And both are
exactly. Oh
beautiful
yeah.
and both
Yeah.
are valid, and I think it really comes down to the feeling of that particular book. Good book.
The
Sorry,
deck.
my brain's
Yeah,
not
I
working.
agree.
Yeah.
The deck dictates what it needs.
Hmm.
And I am always impressed that people who create decks know what their deck needs. I'm always so impressed with that.
Oh, 100%.
And I'm thrilled that I was able to listen to my own deck and
Yeah,
do what my deck needed as well.
yeah,
So you know,
absolutely.
I think we all do what we need to do, and I think we do as a community. I think we're
Mhm.
generally more in tune with what our intuition is telling us.
Yeah.
And so I think we do know what we need to do and what our deck wants. And
Better
this one,
listening to it.
yeah, I mean,
Got a
this deck knew what I wanted, what it wanted long before I even knew what it was. So,
Yeah,
but that
absolutely.
was the weird thing. I've actually had people say, why didn't you have us follow along in your journey of making these cards? And my answer is, well, I did.
Yeah.
Because if you look back on even my website or my Instagram account or whatever, I put the paintings up. I
Yeah.
just didn't know what they were a part of. I didn't know they were a deck, but I did invite you along.
Well, sometimes you need to get to the end of something to see what it is. Do you know what I mean? When I was writing my master's thesis, I spent months working on, I focused on theater history, Salonier in Paris in the early teens to 1930s in Paris. And I spent all this time researching and coming up with all these materials, and all the writing was there, but it was all not quite in the right order. Do you know what I mean? It didn't flow together. And it took my husband actually rearranging a couple of things, and it was done. But you need to have that outside perspective. Like, I know writing is very different from art, but it's like you have to see something in its entirety in order to even see it for what it is sometimes. Do you know what I mean? Like, it takes that.
It's very similar to art, actually. Writing is. It's an art in its own.
Yeah.
And so even when I write things, or when I used to write as a career, I had to see the whole picture before I could put the first word down. But with this deck, it wasn't. I know, I've had even some people say, well, that was just awfully quick, you just suddenly did it. No, it was 5 years, 6 years. It wasn't that quick. It was just I had done the body of work.
Yes.
So in the scheme of things, it seemed quick because all I had to do was crop them and get high resolution versions of them and send it to the printer. So and the printer did it fast because I had everything already ready to go. But the process of painting was years. I didn't put it up as a follow my progress on the deck because I didn't know it was a deck. It didn't tell me it was a deck until this year.
That happens with so many artists in different fields. Like, you look at even Hollywood, somebody's an overnight sensation, but they don't talk about the 10 years they spent building up to that, right? So it's like there's this investment of time and energy that leads up to birthing or launching something that is often not particularly visible. So it can seem like it came together like that, but really the process was quite long and quite invested. And even if it came together in a week or whatever else, I mean, there's no quantifying creativity or figuring out, what's a valid amount of time to invest in something or whatever else. Like you were talking earlier about the creative flow that came through in this deck, and there's something so magical about that, and leaning into that process and letting it flow. And what ends up coming out, like you said, there's that distance of like, this is something I created, but it's separate from me, right? Because it's like, it's like being in that channeling stage of a muse, someone that's allowing this to flow through you, which is really beautiful and powerful. That's amazing.
And that when you were talking about people, it seems like things happen really quickly. I've run into that so many times when I used to go to, COVID just messed everything up, but when I used to go to a lot of these plein air events where you paint on location, and I used to love that because people get to watch your process and you get to talk to them while it's sort of like doing a demo where you show them how you do it. And I love that, and I love the hands-on. But when I would take the work and frame it and put it in a gallery, people would come into the gallery and ask me all the time, how long did it take you to do that? And the answer is, well, 59 years, because my whole life went into producing this. So
absolutely.
And I know for some of them what they're doing is they're calculating in their head, this is how much it cost, and it took, so how much per hour are they making?
Rate,
it's a wrong way to look at that.
It's completely irrelevant when it comes to art. It's like all the time that you invest in honing your skills, and that can be all the things that you learn over the course of your lifetime that have nothing to do with art per se. Do you know what I mean?
That's why, if somebody asked me, how long did it take you to paint that painting? Well, if you ask me today, 59 years. That's how long it took.
No,
because
absolutely.
it's a part of every bit of my life. goes
Yeah.
into it. And that's how it is with every single artist I know.
Yeah.
If you ask any artist, if they're being honest, they'll tell you, however old I am, that's how long it took me to create this.
Yeah.
And it really is. It's your whole
Absolutely.
life. And
Yeah.
so this deck kind of feels, I was really nervous, and you know this because we've chatted about it for I don't know how long. So scared to bring this deck to the public eye.
Mm-hmm.
I made a copy for myself, and I loved it, and I was so scared to bring it to life because it's sort of like, I don't have children, but I imagine it's how you would feel sending your child out into
Mm-hmm.
the world and
Absolutely.
wanting to protect it and not wanting anybody to mistreat it or to dislike them or to
Yep.
bully them. And
Yep.
so it's sort of like, I don't remember who originally said it, but all gratitude for them saying this, but they referred to their child. But I look at my artwork like this.
Yeah.
It's like my heart walking around outside my
Yeah.
body.
That's one of my
And that
favorite quotes.
really, it really
True.
is what
Yeah.
I feel like. And
Yeah.
so it's very scary putting that out there because you're putting your unprotected, vulnerable heart right
Yeah.
out there. And this is not just me, this is every
Mm-hmm.
creator or artist who produces anything and
Yeah.
puts it out in the public. So I hope people will understand when an artist of any type,
Mm-hmm.
musician, writer,
Mm-hmm.
visual art, whatever anyone creates and puts it out there for you,
Yeah.
remember they're giving you a tremendous gift.
It's a huge
They're
act of
giving
bravery.
you part of themselves.
Yeah.
So, and I understand, our work's not going to be for everybody. Like I said, this deck is not for everybody. And if it's not, I understand, and that's wonderful. But please don't beat on my child.
Oh, kindness and compassion is everything, because you're
Yeah.
releasing something out into the world that is so tied to you. Like that creative process is
Yeah.
so fragile and precious, and
It really is. And it is,
yeah.
it's a gift that we're
Yeah.
willing to share this with you.
Yeah.
I did not want to do it. I was very reluctant to do it. When I
Understandably,
sent you the images of each part, it was just, these are such a deep part of me, and it's really frightening.
It is.
To put that out there. And I do feel like in that case, I honestly feel like I can speak for every artist of any type in the world when I say that. When we put these things out here for the public, we are offering you an incredible gift.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you like that particular style or whatever or not, there's plenty of art styles I'm not crazy about.
Yeah.
Regardless of that, I totally love and respect the artist for being vulnerable and stepping up and putting it out there.
It requires huge amounts of bravery to put something of yourself out into the world, I mean,
it really does.
Vulnerability in that because it's something that is from you, right? And that's, it's like,
and you'll notice that vulnerable is not any of the keywords on my cards.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole deck.
Yeah.
That's the deck.
Yeah.
I did not need that as a keyword. That is the deck.
Yeah.
It is my heart walking around outside my body.
Yeah.
And I do feel that way about it. And if I never sell, if I keep all of these here in the house and they stay, you know what? I have a handful of decks that I love.
Yes. Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Yes, that's so true. Well, I have no doubt that will happen because it's absolutely gorgeous. And as soon as people get wind of it, they'll be racing for a copy because I
hope it helps people connect with themselves. I hope it helps people see that they're enough.
Yes.
They just have to find themselves. They have to reconnect with the parts that they have closed off for whatever reason.
Yeah.
There are as many reasons for closing yourself off from yourself as there are people in the world, and every reason is valid. But I'm hopeful that this deck will help you find that part.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it seems like a shame you to close yourself off and never find that part of you.
Mm-hmm. I think that's something that happens for everyone in varying degrees. We get into this world where we have to start adulting, and being serious and paying our taxes and, you know, paying our rent and doing all these things. And I know for myself personally, I got so wrapped up in that I lost track of my inner child for years. And there were
Yeah.
so many experiences in childhood that made that particular time very unsafe for me, with bullying in school and different things. And so reclaiming that, like you said with shadow work earlier, can be kind of scary because it's drawing things back out into the light. But there's also so much power in that process, right? And it's like giving yourself permission to engage with scarier things like vulnerability and allowing yourself to be truly seen, because that in itself is also very scary, right? To
It
allow
is.
someone to see you exactly as you are, not hiding behind anything, right? When you're creating something for a company or for something external to yourself, then there's almost that barrier there, that safety net, you know. But when it's something that you've created that's your art, it's raw and it's
It
open.
is.
Do you know what I mean?
I do. But I've also found, for me, the scariest person to open myself up to was me.
100%.
Which is really a weird thing to say, but
Not at
you
all, actually.
you have to accept all the parts of you, even the ones that you feel like are not lovable. Those are the ones who need you the most.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like this deck can kind of help you find
Mm-hmm.
those parts and
Yeah.
reconnect with those parts, the ones you think aren't lovable. They're
Yeah.
the ones that need you to love them,
Yeah.
because it's sort of like a child throwing a temper tantrum.
Mm-hmm.
If you just hear them,
Yeah.
a lot of times they just need, and I know I'm giving parenting advice as a
No,
childless
it's true
person,
though. It's true.
but I think a lot of times, especially with me, when when the rage card comes up, when I'm feeling rage,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not angry. I
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like I'm being heard.
Oh, 100%. That's always, I find 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, when it comes to my kids, when it comes to myself, when it comes to anything, the major block is not feeling like you're being heard. The next one
Yeah,
is not feeling understood, because that's a whole other aspect. But
yeah,
I mean,
right.
there's something so powerful in being around someone who listens and
Yes,
really truly hears you, you know. And there's so much power in that. Whether and I know, I don't know about you, but my inner mean girl, like, her fangs are sharp.
yeah,
And that
oh
can
yeah,
be
yeah,
my biggest challenge, you know. And so it's like, when I separate myself from that critical voice and I tune into what my inner child is telling me in that softer, more gentle, more vulnerable side of myself, it's really amazing what can come through, you know. It's quite powerful.
yeah. And even working with these cards,
Mm-hmm.
I thought I had just a really angry inner critic. But
Yeah.
when I really sat with the cards and drew cards and journaled about it,
Mm-hmm.
my inner critic was actually not an angry inner critic. It was
Mm-hmm.
grief.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that can be a much harder emotion. I mean, when you deal with someone who's difficult, it's often coming from a place of anger because that person is wounded or hurting in some way, right? It
Yes.
doesn't come from nowhere. And so I think when you can get to the root of that and have that sense of compassion and empathy for where this is coming from, that's a huge part of the
Yeah.
healing process, you know? And
Yeah.
that's what's powerful about this, and the whole process of journaling and identifying where those emotions are coming from and what aspects you need to explore and all of that. Like, there's so much power in that.
Yeah. So
Yeah, amazing.
it's a challenging deck.
Yeah.
I will be the first to admit, and I'll reiterate again, it is not for everyone
Mm-hmm.
because it is a very challenging deck.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like if you're ready
Yeah.
to meet yourself
Yeah.
where you are and maybe go on an adventure with yourself
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of reconnect and rediscover yourself, then I think it's a wonderful tool. And I think it's a wonderful tool with, personally, I think, really beautiful artwork. I don't
That's
know what
awesome.
made its way through my hands to do it, but I
Yeah.
think most of it is really beautiful.
Well, it is.
But
All of it is.
I feel like I'm not a psychiatrist. I am not a counselor or a therapist. It is not my place to tell someone how to heal. But I do feel like this deck of cards can help you kind of get started with what questions to
Yeah.
ask yourself. Or if you're, and I think if you're in therapy, it's probably a wonderful adjunct to that. I know my
Absolutely.
therapist loves the
Yeah.
cards. She doesn't have them, but she has seen
Yeah.
them. She's looked at them. She loves the idea that they can get a conversation started. So if, you know, if you're in therapy and you want to discuss certain things,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the cards can give you an opening. If you're not in therapy, you don't want to be in therapy, that's fine. It's not for everyone. But I do feel like if you can use these to kind of just connect with yourself.
Yes,
I know
absolutely.
some people have gotten them and used them for scrying. They don't even look at the keyword at all.
Yep.
They use them the way I used to look up at the clouds, and I
Yep.
still do,
Yeah. Oh,
and
that's
just see
beautiful.
what you see.
Yep.
And it may not even, I mean, you may not even want to journal. You may just want to see what you see.
Mm-hmm.
And see where your mood takes you, see
Yep.
how it makes you think about things.
Yeah.
I feel like for me, some days I use them as a serious, you
Mm-hmm.
know, intuition type tool.
Mm-hmm.
Other days I'll use them just because I just want to play and look at artwork or
Yep.
different imagery or just different feelings and emotions or whatever, and just have it be really light and all of that. But those are days when I love being a Capricorn. I know you're getting into astrology now, and I'm sure you're well aware that one unique trait of Capricorns is we get younger as we age in our minds, not the rest
No,
of us.
absolutely.
But that is something that I have been told by several astrologers. Well, you know, you get younger as you age. I didn't ride bicycles as a kid. I was an old woman as a child.
Yep.
I was 33 the first time I rode a bicycle
Yep.
ever.
Yep.
So I was an old person as a child.
Yep.
And now as I've gotten older, I feel like I'm becoming a child.
Yeah. No,
And
absolutely.
it's kind of great in its own way. It is kind of great. I don't think 30-year-old me would have dared to put out an oracle deck or do a 24-hour race because that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you have to do what society says. And now that I'm getting older, I'm kind of like, society's wrong about a lot of things.
Oh, 100%.
I want to do this,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm going to do this. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to dye my hair, so I just grabbed some colors that did not go together and put them in there.
Oh, and it's absolutely fabulous. I love it so much. My daughter Adele has a purple streak, and she would absolutely love and appreciate your hair so much because she's all into expressing herself. She's 12 right now, so she's really getting
Oh yeah,
who she is and how she wants to show up in the world. And
right.
dye has become a big thing for that, about that for her. And I love it that she's using that as a tool of expression. Yeah, it's really
So maybe
lovely.
this deck can turn everybody into a Capricorn in that regard and
Yes.
let you get younger as you age,
Yeah.
because there's nothing wrong with that at all.
No, that's wonderful. Well, it's taken me 42 years to be able to actually sit with myself. And I love that this deck has come into my life at the time that it did, because I think this kind of work, even 5 years ago, would have been very overwhelming for me, right? I'm a reforming type A. I was so used to blocking out stress and anxiety by keeping myself so busy that I didn't even stop to think. And the whole concept of being quiet with myself was very intimidating. But now I'm at the point where I've made enough peace with myself that that process is actually quite comforting rather than
Right.
terrifying, you know? And it's so great to have a resource like this that gives me that entry point into really forging that deep connection, right, with myself and making peace with those aspects of myself and exploring, like, where is it that I'm at today? What does this mean to me? How can I find my way through? You know, like, there's all of these really important questions. Like you said, even as daily reflection or journaling, it's really quite
Yeah.
powerful to engage in that. Yeah. So do you
And
have, oh, go
well,
ahead.
even if you're not ready for that kind of thing, and this is just to let people know,
Yeah.
if you're not ready for that kind of deep dive, which this
Mhm.
deck is fully prepared to help you do, it also is 84 pretty pictures. If you just want to sit and just look at some pretty pictures and you don't want to do the deep diving yet, you can just use it just to see what kind of colors or, you
Yep.
know, imagery or anything. I love that one. I still have that original here.
Oh, that's
Um,
gorgeous.
Most of the originals on those I actually gave away
Mhm.
as I did them.
Love this
That
one.
one I do still have.
Yeah. Oh,
But, you know, so it's not a deck that when you pull it out, it's going to be like, you have to do this hard work right now.
Yeah.
If you want to, it's fully prepared and ready to do it. But if you don't, the deck can also be, there are days when I don't want to do all this deep, heavy journaling. And, you know, I struggle with depression and anxiety and PTSD. And those are, sometimes I just can't do all of that. So there are some days when I just want to draw a card and just have it make me smile. And the deck will just do that for me. I could just pull up an image and it'd just be like, ah, that's nice, you know? And so I don't know. I know I created the deck, but I love the deck. It's honestly, it's my favorite.
Yeah.
I mean, it is my favorite. Well, my others that I have in the works, they're my favorites too. But of the ones I have out in public, it's my favorite one. It's the one I go to when I get up in the morning. It's just like, you know, what do I have to say to myself today? What, you know, what do I want to know today? What am I ready for today? And it's just such a, I feel like it's a supportive deck.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And there was so much of your creative energy and your inner child that went into this deck that, you know, you can engage with the deeper emotions, but then there's also that lightness and that levity and that joy. Like I keep coming back to this abundance card because it's at the top. I mean, you've got these beautiful sunflowers and they're just so vibrant and joyful, and the whole concept of abundance, like you were saying earlier with competition with other people, like there's more than enough to go around, and the whole concept of supporting each other as artists and as people. I mean, there's so much power in that, right? And yet you can pull the card another day and it may represent something else, but that's it's really, really beautiful. I keep looking down at the deck. I don't mean to. I love it. So do you, I'm guessing this is probably as difficult as naming your favorite child or favorite pet, but do you have a card that you feel particularly drawn to in this deck?
Yes.
Or was there one that was more challenging for you? I'm always so curious to find out about that.
It's one that I was experimenting with a new technique, and I knew what I wanted to paint. And luckily, my muse painted what I wanted it to be, even though the way I did it was totally wrong. I just took a cup and poured some acrylic ink, some watercolor, some water, some alcohol ink, and some dish detergent in it, in the cup, and swished it all around. And I also put some just plain acrylic paint in there. So I had all this mess of the colors that I liked. And I poured them in this cup and swished them all around and just took the cup upside down and laid it on a board and squished it around certain ways, thinking, oh, I hope this comes out the way I wanted. And when I flipped it back over so the paint would fall out into the cup and then set the board back down, it was exactly what I wanted it to be.
Oh, I love it.
And I was so thrilled. And I was just so happy with that one. And that is Wild.
Oh, amazing. Let me grab that on here. I love that card so much. I have it in alphabetical order so that I can find everything. So beautiful. Oh,
Wild.
I love that.
And if you look at that the title of that painting is actually Wild Horses.
Oh, amazing.
And if you look at the orange there, that's the side view of a horse's face.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
And that's what I wanted. I wanted just a wild horse.
Yeah.
And it just did it. It just magically did it.
Oh,
So
that's incredible.
that's one of my favorites in the deck. That is one of the original paintings that will never, ever, ever leave my possession as long as I'm on this earth. So, yeah.
I understand that. It's stunning. And I just, I have my...
And I love the keyword that came in with it.
Yeah. It's a reflection too. We drove into Truro yesterday. It's about an hour drive. I went in with Adele and we were looking at all the fall foliage as we were driving, and this reminds me of that, of the mixes of greens and yellows and oranges, and you know, it's such a lush time of year, and it's such a beautiful connection to the cycles of nature and the wildness of it, right? Like it's not controlled, it's its own thing on its own time, and there's something so powerful in that, and I love the image of the horse's head too. That's so stunning. I may not have noticed it if you hadn't pointed it out to me, and now I see it so clearly. You know, it's amazing.
And if you look at compassion, I could tell you what I see in that one as well.
Ooh, yeah, I'll pull that one out. Let's see. Yeah, I did these alphabetically so that I could reference.
Because
Oh, I
compassion,
love
I
this
still
one.
have the original.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Yeah. This is
But when that
beautiful.
keyword came to me, what the image looked like to me was a swan.
Yes, absolutely.
And the gold part is the
Yep.
face, the beak and
Yes.
the face.
Yes,
And
you're
to me,
absolutely
I
right.
know swans can be very mean in
Yeah.
nature, but it just, I don't know. I know how swans are with their babies, and it just seemed like
Yeah.
I felt like compassion was a good word, but to me, I see a swan.
Yeah.
If someone else sees something else, that's totally
No,
wonderful.
100%. I see that
But
swan. And
that's, and I already told you on the courage card, I saw the little figure walking around. But
yeah.
some days I don't see it, and some days I do. So it
Yeah.
just, but that's what I loved about each of those paintings. There are just things in them that even
Oh,
I see differently. And I like that whatever muse or whatever it was that just kind of came through me to make that deck.
yeah.
I'm glad that it veered away from my traditional representational landscapes,
Yeah.
because normally what I paint is very clearly what I
Mhm.
see. It's the landscape, or it's
Yeah.
vultures, or it's this, or it's that.
Yeah.
But these could be so many things. I know the things that inspired them,
Yeah.
but they came out just in a different style, which
Yeah.
I was kind of surprised by, but
Yeah.
it was kind of exciting for me too, seeing them come to life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it sounds like it was such an organic process too, which is so lovely. Like that sense of flow and ease is just gorgeous. And you too, also, for anyone who's watching, Tammy does beautiful miniatures of landscapes.
That
They're
is
just
what I do. A
absolutely
lot of these
stunning.
cards are very close to the actual size of the painting.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
so doing the high resolution image for the printer was
Yeah.
really easy
Yeah.
because
Because
I already had it.
they're 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches, right?
Yes.
Cards, yeah. And it's a 330 GSM, I think, too, which is really lovely
It's
texture.
330 GSM. It's
Yeah.
flexible and
Mhm.
they slip real easily.
Yeah.
And I do like jumper cards, and those
Mhm.
will jump.
Mhm.
I don't know if they jump so much because they slip easily or because it's 84 cards.
Yeah.
It's just hard to hold. I have really small hands, so
Okay.
they kind of jump with me. But yeah,
Yeah.
most of the paintings that those are based on are 4 inches square, so
Oh, wow.
it's not a big difference. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you're kind of getting an almost life-size print of each of the originals.
Oh, that's
Is what
amazing.
you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's still a good size in your hand. Like it's
Yeah,
quite I find it quite easy to shuffle actually. It's not like some Oracle decks can be quite large and hard to shuffle.
yeah,
They're really
yeah.
big cards, like they're lovely, but it's just like the shuffling process can be a bit trickier. But with this one I find a lot of ease in moving through the cards and stuff, which is so lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted them a little bit smaller because, like I said, I have small hands and I have
Hmm.
arthritis. And
Hmm.
some of the big decks, as much as I love them and as beautiful
Yeah.
as they are difficult for
Hmm.
me to just. That's just me. With
Yeah.
tiny arthritic hands, it's challenging. I
Yeah.
mean, the little ones are just much easier,
Yeah.
and I like the more flexible cardstock on
Hmm.
these because I can riffle them if I have a
Yeah.
really bad
Yeah.
arthritis
Yeah.
day. Yeah.
But they have a nice weight to them too. Like yeah, it's a really nice balance.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, it's lovely. So before I forget, I also want to let everybody know where they can find you. So on Instagram, at Tammy Kaufman Art, and then you also have your website, which is www.tammykaufman.com.
TammyKaufman.com.
Yeah, yeah. And you retail your decks to the US on your website, and then if there's any international orders, it would be through Phoenix and Lotus, which has a
That's
selection of your
correct.
decks. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. That's
Yes.
awesome.
Jen has a selection of them. I think
Yeah.
I think she actually has some of them in her New Hampshire
Oh, nice. Yeah,
part of
yeah.
Etsy Caravan or whatever she's
Yeah.
doing
Oh,
today.
that's amazing. Yeah, that's so
Yes,
much
she has
fun.
some. She
I
has some of
someday would
there.
love to get down to her
Yeah,
shop
I
and see it in
just
person.
I just decided on my site to just ship to the US
Yeah.
because it's just me doing
Mhm.
this,
Oh, yeah,
and
I'm sure.
it's I just set it up where it's through PayPal, so
Mhm.
if something happens, they
Yeah,
do take care of you.
yeah,
And I just ship everything priority because the postal
mm,
system is having some challenges
yeah,
right now.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's the only shipping option. It's
Yeah,
priority small box. and I basically charge you what the retail
Mm-hmm.
shipping is.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, and I've while supplies last, I don't know how many more I have, but I have been including with the orders that go out a little teeny tiny, like a 2 inch by 2 inch original.
Oh,
Just
amazing.
a little original sketch type thing. It's
I
nothing
have this
fancy.
one that you gave me, and I love it. It's right on my
Yeah.
desk, right by my candles, so I look at it every day when I do my pulls.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So
Yeah.
that's until I run out of those. And they're just little,
Yeah.
they're nothing fancy. They're little 2 inch by 2 inch on just little
Beautiful.
boards.
Yeah.
And
Oh, great.
but they, so while I have some of those with each order, I'm including one of those in there.
Oh, that's amazing. That's super special.
But that's what I'm. But like I said, I don't know how many more I have. I don't think it's very many.
Mm-hmm. Well, it
I
was a
don't have
limited
as many of
run,
those as I do decks, and I do
Yeah.
have right now. I think I have 24 decks left.
Okay.
I think,
Yeah.
and I don't know how many Jen has.
Mm-hmm.
She had 15, so
Yeah.
I don't know how many she sold or if she
Mm-hmm.
sold any, but she did have 15.
Yeah.
And I had only printed 50 decks,
Mm-hmm.
and I did this. I wanted to. I get really nervous about, oh, will people like it or not like it? So
Yes.
I didn't want to do the Kickstarter thing and all of that. So what I had done is, over the years, where my intuition taught me also, I was selling original paintings.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve and I decided together, let's put a separate savings account just for that money in case you need it for something.
Yep.
And I just guarded that money with my life. There was just something in me was like, I'm going to need this at some point.
Yeah.
So when I looked at how much it would be to do a 50 deck run,
Yeah.
it was almost exactly the amount of money I had in that account.
Serendipity.
So,